August 1, 1943. 5:30 in the morning. Tunisian desert air still clings to the night's final breath of coolness. And somewhere on a runway carved into the dust, a B-24 Liberator, named the Sandman, trembles under the weight of one of the most dangerous missions of World War II. Engines roar. The ground vibrates. And you can almost feel the heat radiating off the metal skin of the bomber as the crew climbs aboard, each man carrying not just gear, but fate. No one says it out loud, but they all know. This mission isn't expected to return many of them home. In just a few hours, they will be flying into a firestorm so violent, so suicidal, that even seasoned commanders called it a gamble with death itself. And among the hundreds of aircraft preparing to take off, one B-24 will soon carve its name into history, not because it fought bravely, not because it dropped its bombs, but because it would survive something no bomber should ever survive. A B-24 that would fly home, with half a wing. But before that miracle could ever happen, the crews of Operation Tidal Wave had to survive the first unforgiving step, getting into formation, skimming above the desert, and diving low toward a fortress of oil refineries in Romania, targets so heavily defended they were called flak factories. The sun creeps over the horizon as the Liberators lift off one by one, their shadows stretching across the sand like massive metal birds. The mission plan is simple in theory and terrifying in execution. Fly low. Stay under radar. Hit the refineries at Ploiești. Escape before Axis defenses can react. Low-level bombing. For a heavy bomber. Through hostile territory. For 1,000 miles. Every single step pushes the limits of what these flying giants were ever meant to do. Inside the Sandman, the crew settles into that tense, silent rhythm only bomber teams truly understand. No small talk. No jokes. Just the quiet hum of concentration, the tightening of gloves, the click of a safety harness, the steady breath before the storm. Captain Robert Sternfels, the pilot, keeps his eyes pinned on the horizon, and every mile forward brings a new weight to his chest. Because this mission isn't ordinary. It's personal. The refineries at Ploiești supply nearly a third of Germany's entire oil. Destroying them could cripple the Nazi war machine. Every drop of fuel burned in a Panzer division, every Messerschmitt patrolling the skies, every Tiger tank rolling toward the Eastern Front. It all depends on the lifeblood pumped from those refineries. If Tidal Wave succeeds, it could shorten the war. If it fails, thousands of airmen could vanish in a single day. Hours into the flight, the formation stretches over the Mediterranean like a migrating flock moving in perfect, deadly harmony. From above, the B-24s glide smooth and majestic. But inside them, the men feel every vibration, every micro-shudder, every warning that the engines are straining at the edge of what they can handle. At low altitude, the smell of oil and metal mixes with desert dust sucked inside the cockpit vents. The Liberator's belly scrapes the sky so closely to the earth that the propellers seem to slice shadows into the ground. One mistake, one sudden downdraft, one engine hiccup, and the plane becomes a rolling fireball. But the crew pushes on, because there is no turning back. As they cross the Balkans, the first sign of trouble hits. Navigation errors ripple through the formation like a silent curse. Slight deviations, tiny corrections. One group drifting a little too far north, another swinging south, imperceptible at first, but deadly in their consequences. The plan begins to fracture. The sky that once looked orderly starts to twist into chaos. Sternfels notices it. The crew notices it. Everyone does. But the worst part? No one can fix it now. They are already committed. The mountains ahead rise like jagged teeth, waiting to swallow any bomber flying too low or too slow. And beyond those mountains lies Ploiești, one of the most heavily defended industrial zones in all of Europe. Some crews pray under their breath. Some clench their fists. Some look at photographs tucked into their vests. But all of them keep flying. Because the next 30 minutes will decide whether they live or whether their plane becomes a twisted wreck scattered across a foreign field. Then, just as they sweep past the Carpathians, black smoke becomes visible even from miles away. Columns of thick, oily plumes rise into the sky like dark pillars, climbing higher and higher, warning the Americans of exactly what's waiting for them. The Axis is ready, awake, waiting with guns already aimed. Machine gun nests. Flak batteries. At least 50 heavy anti-aircraft positions. Fighters on standby. Refinery towers wrapped in webs of defensive firepower. Everything about Ploiești screams one truth. This is a trap. The crews feel their mouths go dry. Their breathing tightens. Their hands grip metal a little harder. And yet the bombers press on, dropping lower and lower until the fields of Romania blur beneath them like a green-brown smay. Wind lashes the fuselage. Trees whip past beneath the wings. The Liberators are now flying so low that farmers can see the faces of the airmen as they roar overhead. The final approach begins. And every crew knows the moment the first gun opens fire, hell will erupt. But they don't know, not yet, that the Sandman is about to enter a maelstrom so violent that it will tear apart aircraft mid-air. That one bomber will lose half its wing, collapsing on itself, and still, somehow, refuse to fall. And as Captain Sternfels adjusts his throttle for the attack run, he has no clue that fate is about to write his crew into aviation legend. The bomber is bleeding altitude. Every second, the damaged aircraft sinks a little lower, fighting against the pull of gravity with a wing that can barely hold itself together. The pilot feels it through the yoke, a sluggish, uneven response, like trying to steer a car with one tire blown out. The right side keeps dipping. The left engines are straining, coughing as they overcompensate. If he lets go for even a heartbeat, the aircraft will roll and plunge straight into the burning sprawl of the refinery. Inside the cockpit, the co-pilot glances toward the wing and freezes at the sight. Flames trail behind the shredded metal like the tail of a comet. Every gust of wind threatens to fan the fire into an explosion. And yet, the bomber is still in the heart of the target zone, still surrounded by walls of black smoke and angry bursts of flak. The intercom crackles with frantic voices. Starboard fuel tanks hit. The line's leaking, pressure's dropping. Wing's gonna go. She's breaking apart. The pilot doesn't respond. He can't. His focus is locked entirely on the horizon, that narrow strip of sky that promises open air, escape, survival. If he can just hold the bomber together for another 30 seconds, maybe 60, they might clear the worst of the refinery defenses. But those defenses aren't done with them yet. Ahead, a row of flak towers opens up, firing directly at the low-flying Liberator. Traces streak upward, glowing white-hot in the smoky haze. In the nose turret, the bombardier fires back, although he knows it's hopeless. The towers aren't meant to be destroyed. They are meant to shred anything that dares to fly this low. A burst of flak detonates so close that it punches a hole through the nose glass the size of a fist. Splinters shower across the bombardier's face. Another explosion rocks the fuselage, blowing open panels and sending debris spiraling through the waist section. The aircraft wobbles, then steadies as the pilot grits his teeth and forces it back under control. But the fire on the wing is getting worse. It crawls along the torn metal like a living creature, feeding on streaming fuel. The smell of burning aviation gasoline reaches the cockpit, sharp, metallic, suffocating. The pilot knows what that means. The fuel tank is venting vapor. If a single spark hits the right pocket of fumes, the bomber will vanish in mid-air. The navigator leans forward, voice tight with panic. We're not gonna make it. We have to bail. No one jumps, the pilot snaps. Not yet. He looks out the side window again. The wing is bending now, not flexing, not vibrating, bending, like a tree branch groaning under too much weight. One more hit, one more blast of turbulence, and it will shear off completely. Still, he keeps flying. Below them, the refinery roars with fire, massive columns of flame spearing into the sky from ruptured fuel tanks. Black smoke spreads across the ground in choking waves. It's a hellscape, a living inferno, and the bomber is skimming through it like a fragile scrap of aluminum held together only by stubbornness and adrenaline. Then, suddenly, the ground defenses quiet. The flak stops. The traces fade. Through the front windows, the pilot sees a narrow corridor of open air, a sliver of escape through the rising smoke columns. They've crossed the worst of the refinery's defenses. Now all they need is altitude, distance, time. But the bomber isn't climbing. The damaged wing can't generate enough lift. The pilot forces more power through the left engines. They scream in protest, pushing to their mechanical limits. The aircraft shudders, buffeted by the shockwaves rising from the burning complex. Slow, dragging. Every second feels like a lifetime. Then the co-pilot notices something. The fire. It's spreading across the spar. If the central spar fails, the entire wing will fall off. The bomber won't crash, it will disintegrate. In the waist section, the gunners can see parts of the wing skin peeling back, flapping wildly in the slipstream. One section finally rips off, spinning backward and striking the tail with a metallic crack that echoes through the whole aircraft. Shouts ripple through the intercom again. Tail's it. Control cables are loose. We are falling apart. The pilot pushes the throttle farther, desperately trying to gain speed. But speed is a double-edged sword. Faster airflow means the fire spreads quicker. Faster airflow means more pressure on the failing wing. Faster airflow means structural failure is seconds away. Yet without speed, they can't climb. They can't escape. They can't survive. This is the moment every pilot dreads, the moment where physics, fire, and fate all converge. There is no manual for this. No training scenario. No fallback plan. Just instinct. Just will. Just raw human determination. The pilot sets his jaw and keeps the bomber level, refusing to give up. Behind him, the crew braces themselves, holding on to anything they can. Some pray. Some curse. Some simply stare at the burning wing in stunned silence, waiting for the explosion. But it doesn't come. Not yet. A sudden gust of wind blows across the damaged wing, and something miraculous happens. The airflow pushes the flames backward, away from the main spar. The fire, instead of racing toward the fuel tanks, starts to trail behind the bomber in a thin, ragged stream. The pilot sees it and acts instantly. He banks the bomber slightly, using the slipstream to drag the flames even farther away from the structural frame. It's a gamble, a dangerous one, but it works. The fire flickers, weakens, then steadies into a long, trailing flame rather than a spreading inferno. It buys them seconds. Precious seconds. Seconds that will decide whether they live or die. We're clearing the target area, the navigator says, voice trembling. If we can gain some altitude. We can't, the pilot replies. Not yet. She won't take any more stress. So the bomber stays low, skimming the fields and villages of Romania like a wounded bird trying desperately to stay aloft. Then, through the smoke, they see something that freezes every soul on board. Fighters. German and Romanian fighters. Heinkel 112s and Bf 109s, scrambling from a nearby airfield, climbing fast, turning toward the scattered Liberators. And the wounded B-24, flying low and slow, is the easiest target in the sky. The pilot whispers under his breath, "Hold together, just a little longer." Because if the wing doesn't fail, the fighters will arrive, and the real battle will begin. The fighters close in fast. From the cockpit, the pilot can see them, small black specks rising through the haze, growing larger with every heartbeat. Their silhouettes sharpen as they angle toward the crippled bomber, wings glinting in the early morning sun. Messerschmitts. Fast, agile, hungry. Hunting. The co-pilot swallows hard. They've got us marked. Of course they do. A wounded B-24 limping away from Ploiești at treetop height is the perfect kill. To the fighter pilots lifting off from the nearby airfield, it must look like a gift, an easy victory waiting to be claimed. All they need to do is close the gap. Inside the bomber, everyone knows what's coming. The waist gunners swing their .50 caliber Brownings toward the rear. Metal rattles. Belts of ammunition clatter into place. Sweat drips. Hands shake. They are trained for this, but training doesn't prepare you for watching fighters dive toward your burning wing like wolves descending on a wounded animal. The pilot glances once more at the wing. The fire is still trailing behind, a thin, spitting ribbon, but the structural damage is growing uglier by the second. Chunks of metal hang loose. The entire leading edge looks like it was torn open by a giant's claw. He can see the sky through gaps that should be solid aluminum. The B-24 wasn't built to take this kind of punishment. And it certainly wasn't built to dogfight. Brace yourselves, the pilot mutters, tightening his grip on the yoke. They are coming in hot. The first Messerschmitt dives. The scream of its engine cuts through the air like a knife. A streak of cannon fire tears past the cockpit, bright orange flashes slicing through the haze. The rounds hit the left wing, punching holes through the metal, sending fragments spraying backward like shrapnel. The bomber lurches violently, but the pilot keeps it steady. The tail gunner fires back, the twin .50s roaring with a fury that shakes the entire aircraft. Traces stretch out behind the bomber in long, glowing arcs. The Messerschmitt breaks off, climbing sharply, but another fighter is already diving in to replace it. The waist gunner shouts, "One more, coming low, left side." The second fighter rips past with terrifying speed, cannon shells peppering the fuselage. A buzz strikes the right wing, the already damaged wing, and for a split second, everything inside the bomber seems to stop. Everyone listens. Everyone waits. Because if the spar gives out now, nothing happens. The wing, miraculously, stays on. But the fighters aren't giving up. They swing around again, forming a loose circle, tightening their pattern, preparing for another coordinated pass. Their engines wail in rising crescendos as they climb, turn, and dive through the smoky sky. The flight engineer leans forward, voice strained. "We can't take this. We'll break apart before they shoot us down." The pilot knows. Every shake, every hit, every blast of turbulence could be the one that tears the crippled wing clean off. But if he slows down, the fighters will tear them to pieces. If he tries to climb, the wing will fail. There is no escape maneuver, no safe option, just survival, just guts, just the narrowest thread of hope. Then the radio crackles. It's faint, distorted, almost drowned by static, but real. "Liberator, coming in, hold on." The co-pilot's eyes widen. Friendly call sign. One of ours. The pilot scans the sky, straining to see through the haze. At first, nothing. Then, through a gap in the drifting smoke, he spots it, another B-24, flying low, angling toward them. It's battered, scorched, missing pieces of the tail, but still airborne. And still fighting. A second voice crackles through the radio. "Hang tight, boys. We're dragging them off you." The trailing Liberator opens fire, its turrets blazing. The fighters hesitate, taken by surprise. The sudden burst of .50 caliber fire disrupts their attack pattern. One fighter peels away. Another climbs sharply. For a moment, a fleeting, fragile moment, the pressure lifts. The waist gunner lets out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. They are drawing fire. They are actually drawing fire. It's a miracle. A small one. But in this sky, even small miracles mean survival. But the damaged B-24 isn't safe yet. The fighters regroup quickly, circling higher, looking for a new angle of attack. The pilot knows they won't be distracted forever. He has seconds, maybe a minute, before the next pass. The navigator crawls up beside the pilot, maps flapping in the turbulent airflow. There's a river ahead. If we follow the bend, it might give us some cover. "Terrain cover?" the co-pilot asks. "No," the navigator replies. "Smoke cover. There's a burning fuel depot near the bank. Big plume. If we skim through it, they'll lose visual." The pilot doesn't hesitate. "Do it." He banks the bomber gently as an aircraft with half a wing can be banked, and heads toward the rising column of black smoke drifting from the riverbank. It's a gamble. Flying into smoke could blind them, choke the engines, hide unseen obstacles. But staying in open air means certain death. The wounded bomber sinks even lower. The ground is frighteningly close now. Trees rush past just beneath the belly. Farmhouses blur by. Villages on the riverbank scatter as the massive, flaming aircraft thunders overhead, trailing smoke and fire like a comet breaking apart in the atmosphere. Behind them, the fighters see what's happening. They dive again, fast, aggressive, determined to strike before the bomber vanishes into the smoke. The tail gunner fires one long, desperate burst. Traces streak toward a Messerschmitt. One round connects. Just one. But it's enough. The fighter jerks suddenly, smoke erupting from its engine cowling. It veers off course, clipping the wing of another fighter as it spirals out of control. The second fighter spins to avoid collision. Their formation breaks. The attack collapses into chaos. It gives the bomber the opening it needs. The pilot yanks the yoke, pushing the aircraft into the wall of black smoke rising from the river. The world outside disappears instantly, swallowed by darkness. The crew can see nothing but swirling black clouds. The engines cough, Sputter, struggle. Nobody speaks. Nobody breathes. They've escaped the fighters, for now, but they are flying blind, one wing burning, the other overstressed, the altimeter dropping dangerously low. And somewhere ahead, hidden in the darkness, is Romania's brutal, mountain-carved countryside. One wrong turn, and they won't need enemies to kill them. Gravity will do the job just fine. The bomber plunges deeper into the smoke. It's like flying through ink. The world outside the cockpit windows vanishes completely. No sky, no ground, no horizon. Just a swelling black void pressing in from all sides. The engines gasp for oxygen, coughing as soot and ash stream into the intakes. The pilot can barely see his own hand on the throttles, much less the terrain ahead. Inside the fuselage, the crew is silent. No one dares to speak. No one dares to move. Even a whisper feels like it could break the fragile balance keeping them alive. The only sounds are the groan of stressed metal, the uneven rattle of the engine on the damaged wing, and the distant crackling of fire licking at the torn aluminum. The pilot wipes a sleeve across his goggles, but it does nothing. The smoke is too thick. He's flying blind, dangerously, recklessly blind, at a height where the trees outside should have already ripped open the belly of the aircraft. Altitude, he snaps. The navigator squints at the trembling needles on the instrument panel. Too low. Way too low. We need to climb. We can't. The pilot's voice is sharp, absolute. The wing won't take it. The altimeter drops another few feet. Then another. Then a few more. They are skimming the ground, flying at a height lower than some church steeples. One mistake, one sudden hill, one tall tree, and they'll be swallowed by the earth long before the fire gets them. The co-pilot leans in, his voice barely audible. Pull up just a hair. 2 feet. 3. Anything. The pilot gently, agonizingly slowly, inches the yoke back. The right wing shudders. A loud metallic crack echoes through the fuselage. Easy, he whispers. And for a terrifying moment, the bomber threatens to roll, the right side dipping sharply as the damaged wing flexes. The pilot counters instantly, pushing the yoke left, leveling the aircraft by sheer instinct and muscle. The smoke grows even thicker. It curls around the engines in oily ribbons. It slips through the cracks in the fuselage. The crew can smell burning chemicals now, heavy, oily, suffocating. The bombardier coughs violently. The waist gunner wraps his face in a piece of cloth, eyes watering. The pilot's vision is down to inches. Just a faint glow from the instrument panel. Just the shaking needles. Just the hiss of the radio. Then, through the haze, a shadow appears on the right side, a jagged shape rising fast. A rock outcrop. The pilot reacts instantly, banking left so sharply the entire crew slams against the interior walls. The damaged wing screams under the stress, bending dangerously. But the bomber slips past the outcrop by a margin so tight the metal on the wingtip scrapes something solid, sending sparks trailing behind them. The navigator's voice breaks as he shouts, "We've got to get out of this smoke." "We will," the pilot answers. "Hold on." But the smoke is thicker ahead, rolling upward in a wall of black that blots out the rising sun. The fire feeding it must be enormous, an entire fuel depot going up in flames, creating a man-made storm cloud. The pilot makes a split-second decision. He pushes the throttles forward, sending the bomber charging deeper into the darkness. The engines scream. The fuselage groans. The crew struggles to stay seated as the aircraft accelerates, engines gulping air so full of soot they wheeze like dying lungs. The altimeter drops again. Then again. They can't go lower. They simply can't. The pilot leans forward and mutters through clenched teeth, "Come on, brake, brake." And suddenly, it does. The bomber bursts out of the smoke like a bullet tearing through cloth. Sunlight floods the cockpit. The world reappears in a violent explosion of color and clarity. Fields, forests, the winding curve of the river they've been following, all of it rushing past beneath them. But the crew barely has time to breathe, because the smoke cloud has spit them out into something far worse. Mountains. Dark, tall, rigid, unyielding. Romania's Carpathian ranges rise in brutal walls ahead, ridges carved sharply against the sky, valleys winding like traps, slopes covered in thick forest. A perfect maze. A perfect ambush. A perfect place to die. The co-pilot swears under his breath. We're too low. We're way too low for this terrain. The pilot already knows. The bomber is boxed in. The mountains ahead rising far too fast to clear with a damaged wing. The river narrowing into a canyon that could become a dead end at any moment. They can't turn sharply. The wing won't survive the stress. They can't climb. The damaged structure will snap. And they can't slow down. The fighters will catch up the moment they are out of cover. It's a trap. But not an impossible one. The pilot's eyes lock onto the terrain ahead, tracing the curves, the shadowed valleys, the lines of trees. He sees a path. Not a safe one. Not a sane one. But a path. We follow the canyon, he says. As long as it runs west, we stick with it. Sir, that canyon could dead end. Then we improvise. The navigator opens his mouth to argue, then closes it. Because something terrifying is happening. The B-24's right wing is sagging. Actually sagging, like it's beginning to detach under its own weight. The fire was blown backward through the smoke, but the structural damage remains. Whatever metal held the wing together is melting, bending, thinning. If they pull up even 10 feet too sharply, if they bank a few degrees too quickly, if they catch the wrong gust of mountain wind, the wing will tear off, and the bomber will drop like a stone. The canyon ahead narrows. The mountains draw closer. The air thins. The margin for error shrinks to nothing. And behind them, faint at first, then rising, comes the unmistakable whine of engines. Fighters. They didn't lose them. They were only delayed. The pilot breathes out slowly, steadying himself. His voice is calm. Too calm. All right, boys. This isn't about fighting anymore. He lowers the nose. He tightens his grip on the controls. He stays down the twisting canyon like a man preparing to thread a needle while blindfolded. This is about getting home. Behind them, the fighters begin to close the distance again. And ahead of them, the canyon curves sharply to the left. A turn the pilot must make, even if it kills them. Dawn crept over the Mediterranean like a slow bleeding ember, painting the sky in dull streaks of red and gold. The surviving liberators, those that hadn't been swallowed by flak, fighters, or fire, limped toward Libya in scattered fragments of what had once been a tight, disciplined formation. Engines coughed. Wingtips dripped fuel. The cockpits were filled with men who no longer spoke, because there was nothing left to say. They had crossed into a realm where language didn't matter, only survival did. But somewhere behind them, far later than they should have still been airborne, one last B-24 fought to stay out of the sea. The one with half a wing. Inside that battered aircraft, the world had narrowed to a single trembling idea: keep flying. Rivets had blown clean off the right wing, leaving jagged, exposed spars gleaming in the sun. The missing section made the aircraft constantly roll, forcing the pilot to muscle the yoke as if he were wrestling a living creature. Every minute hurt. Every minute required a human miracle just to stay level. But they were close now. Or at least, that's what they kept telling themselves. Beneath them lay nothing but water, blue, endless, uncaring. The B-24 was sinking inch by inch as the weakened frame failed to hold altitude. They all knew what it meant if the engines quit, or if the remaining wing finally gave way. Liberators didn't ditch well. They broke apart like brittle wood hitting concrete, snapping clean in two. No one said it out loud, but every man on board felt the same cold fact: if they touched the water, they were dead. The pilot stared ahead, sweat dripping into his eyes. He hadn't relaxed his grip on the controls in nearly 3 hours. His arms felt carved from stone, heavy and burning, but he refused to let go. The bomber shuddered violently every few seconds as if trying to shake him off. Over the intercom, the engineer announced fuel levels in a choke voice. The gauge was dropping faster than expected, faster than they could afford. They had maybe 20 minutes of flight left, maybe less. But then, on the horizon, the faint, shimmering line of land appeared. It was nothing more than a sliver at first, barely darker than the water beneath it. But as the minutes crawled on, the coastline grew sharper, clearer, like a hand reaching out of the earth. A promise, a salvation that the crew barely dared to believe in. For some of the men, tears welled silently. Others clenched their fists. One muttered a prayer he hadn't spoken since childhood. After everything they had endured, the fire, the chaos, the oil fields erupting beneath them, the storm of flak, now they were within sight of home. But the bomber had one more cruel twist to deliver. As they approached the airfield, the damaged right aileron locked. The pilot fought it, but the aircraft jerked hard, dropping altitude in a violent spiral. They were still too high, too fast, too broken. They needed to circle, to line up properly, to make a controlled descent, but the plane wouldn't allow it. They had one chance. One impossible, reckless chance. The pilot radioed ahead. "Clear the runway. We're coming in, whether we can control her or not." Down they came. The landing gear groaned under pressure. The half-wing dragged the aircraft sideways like an anchor. The B-24 slammed into the runway, so hard the crew thought the fuselage had snapped. Tires burst. Metal screamed. Sparks flew in long, bright arcs. The bomber skidded, veering wildly, leaving a trail of shredded rubber and torn aluminum until, finally, it came to a grinding stop. Silence. A silence so heavy it seemed unreal. Then the crew began to move. Slowly at first, as if afraid the aircraft might still try to kill them. When the hatch opened, sunlight flooded in, warm and blinding. Ground crews ran toward them, staring in disbelief at the shredded wing, the gaping holes, the battered faces of men who had just defied gravity, fate, and every law of probability. One mechanic whispered, "This thing shouldn't have made it across the runway, let alone the Mediterranean." But it had, because of one pilot's refusal to surrender. Because of a crew that worked as one even when the world around them fell apart. Because survival, sometimes, is a choice made second by second. And long after the noise, the smoke, and the chaos of Operation Tidal Wave faded into the footnotes of war, men would remember this liberator. The bomber that came home missing half a wing. The miracle machine that should have crashed, but didn't. A testament to courage. A symbol of what happens when human will pushes past what is possible. And in the end, this battered aircraft became more than a story of survival. It became the embodiment of the mission itself, costly, flawed, tragic, but unbelievably courageous. A reminder that some chapters in history are written not by perfect machines, but by imperfect men who refused to let go.